Man, has it been a wild day as trades are flying in left and right. You would think the trade deadline was today with the amount of traffic we have seen so far, but it is Thursday and teams are gearing up to make those big switches for their playoff pushes, grinding in and trying to take in some potential players for some rebuilding teams, and we've got a lot to talk about regarding that. So, in this episode, we're going to be looking at the three trades that happened today and then looking back at the two trades that happened earlier this week because I didn't get to break those down, going over my thoughts on just every single transaction, going over all the details. So, without further ado, let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section if your team is involved in one of these trades, and let's get into it. So we'll start with the heavy hitter and the biggest trade that has happened so far, the one that has come out of left field involving the Memphis Grizzlies. As you know, they traded Desmond Bane last offseason with the Orlando Magic. They've had rumblings of a Ja Morant potential trade and even Jaren Jackson discussions with those Ja Morant trade rumors going to last year, and with this season seeing some injuries, still seeing some possibilities of a blow up with Ja Morant in a possible trade with the looming days. It just made sense for the Grizzlies, who find themselves out of the play-in race and looking closer towards the bottom of the barrel, to kind of reset and reevaluate some of their younger prospects that they've been able to pan out on. And they do this in a deal by trading Jaren Jackson, John Conchar, Jock Landale, and Vince Williams Jr. to the Utah Jazz for Walter Clayton Jr., Kyle Anderson, Taylor Hendricks, Georges Niang, and three future first-round picks. The Grizzlies also create a $28 million traded player exception, which they can use to help out facilitate some other deals to get more draft capital, either in this trade deadline or in the off-season, to help bolster their rebuild as well, while the Jazz take a swing on Jaren Jackson Jr. So first, let's look at this from the Utah Jazz side of things. They bring in Jaren Jackson Jr., whose extension will be kicking in next year, making $50 million, but is probably the best player that this Jazz team could have gone out and gotten with that money, obviously, with them not being a prime free agency destination and being a little bit of a rebuilding team over these last couple of years. There's no one screaming to go to Utah, so they have to bring in these guys via trade. That's what they did with Lauri Markkanen. They almost traded him, but decided to keep him after almost giving him up to Golden State and extending him, and now they go out and bring in Jaren Jackson to kind of help bolster this core. It's also noted that their center Walker Kessler, who is a restricted free agent this summer, is someone that they would like to re-sign as well. So the Jazz kind of going with a little bit of a big lineup here. Kessler being that solid offensive or solid defensive rim pressure and rebounder. Obviously, Jaren Jackson not the best rebounder, but someone who can help out in the offensive game, scoring in the front court alongside those guys. And Lauri Markkanen has had some success at the three, playing alongside in his Cleveland days. So I do think him kind of adjusting to that will be pretty cool with the emergence of Keontae George, Ace Bailey, and another lottery pick as well for this Utah Jazz team coming in this year. It does look like that they'll be heading into that direction of actually trying to compete and be relevant going into next season, and I think that is very, very key. They also bring in guys like John Conchar, who the Grizzlies have been trying to move off since last season when they were trying to duck some second apron and salary issues dating back to last season when they traded Marcus Smart. They also traded away Jock Landale, who is a solid rotational big and someone who could help in a playoff push, or maybe as someone to be moved on in another deal with the Jazz going on in these next couple of hours. And then also Vince Williams Jr., another young product piece, but someone who kind of fell out of that rotation for the Grizzlies, with other young guys like G.G. Jackson being there, Cam Spencer, Scottie Pippen Jr., Cedric Howard, Zach Edey, and etc. It just made sense for them to move off of him, and obviously the Jazz are going to be bringing in those guys to kind of re-help their team and kind of reshuffle the pieces on the edges there. And then for the Memphis Grizzlies, they bring in a lot of youth talent. Like I mentioned, they created a $28 million traded player exception, which I presume they will use here maybe for that Jakob Poeltl trade involving the Sacramento Kings, because the Kings don't want to take on that contract for Sabonis, or some other deal maybe in the offseason to garner some more additional draft capital. They have 17 future first round picks, which is one of the most amongst some of the other teams like the Thunder and other young competing teams. And I do like this kind of direction that the Grizzlies are going in. They saw the Thunder replicate it pretty well over these last couple of years to build their kind of championship squad, and I think the Grizzlies kind of had that same vision with Bane, Jaren Jackson, and John Morant. Unfortunately, with injuries and just how their play style and scheming worked, it didn't really go into fruition. So now they're going to hit that reset button and look to go with that in the future. And they bring in, obviously, Walter Clayton Jr., a former first-round pick and former NCAA champion with the Florida Gators last season, someone who had kind of fallen in this rotation with Isaiah Collier and Keontae George really rising this season, so it could be a nice young guard to kind of flourish alongside Ty Jerome, Scottie Pippen, and once John Morant leaves kind of in that guard room. And then obviously Kyle Anderson and Georges Niang, kind of some of those salary filler contracts. And then Taylor Hendricks, someone that has been kind of a mystery bag of all tools when he was drafted, but hasn't really been able to shine really in the Utah Jazz system, with them having a lot of forwards and wings over these last couple of years, and with him dealing with injuries as well. This season he has looked a little bit brighter with him having some injuries kind of get past himself, but obviously in a team with Memphis who's been able to handle those injuries and very well with their young players and also get the best out of their young players, I do think this is a nice little fresh restart for Taylor Hendricks as well. Ultimately, I do like this trade a lot. The Grizzlies also are getting 3 future first-round picks. Those picks include the favorable of the 2027 pick, that is the Minnesota, Cleveland, and Utah pick, most likely going to be the Utah pick due to the fact that Cleveland still is going to be stacked and Minnesota's in those rumors for Giannis Antetokounmpo, which we'll get into just a little bit. I also do think they also did get 2 other firsts. They got the 2031 first, from the Phoenix Suns, the one that they traded to the Jazz for those 3 picks last year at the deadline. And the Grizzlies also got the 2027 first-round pick from the Los Angeles Lakers as well. Maybe not best pick available, but one that definitely has some intrigue with the uncertainty of LeBron James in the offseason, and also if what they're going to build around Luka Doncic. So for the Grizzlies, I do think it is a good move for them. They do officially reset their clock, really find themselves to be one of those bottom barrel teams. Obviously, probably not going to get all the way to the bottom with how many teams are tanking, but still going to be in the lottery and still have the chance to rise in that part of the game to maybe even jump to get a top tier pick to add to their core of, Cedric Howard, Zach Edey, and other young pieces that they are going to be experimenting with Cam Spencer. I do expect them to also look on the fringes for a John Morant trade, regardless of where that will be. We don't know, but I do think that will eventually transpire, especially because they traded Jaren Jackson. And for the Jazz, I think this is an even better trade because once again, they've been bad for a couple years, but they are finally cashing in on some of these players to make that all-time move, to bring in a guy. And even though if the fit is a little bit weird with how big that lineup is, I do think it will help the Jazz kind of get some winning culture into their team, one that they've desperately needed after being bad for these last couple of seasons going into next year. And then I do think with them getting an additional lottery pick, Ace Bailey, Keontae George, and this core, we can kind of see what they can do. And once again, this is not their final move, right? They can still make more pieces and more additions throughout the years to kind of really bolster this team around Jaren Jackson, or what direction they really truly need to go. But I do think this is a nice stepping stone to get into that contention category for the Jazz. So overall, I think that this was both a win-win trade for both teams. Next, we're going to be talking about a shocking one that came through to play involving 3 teams. It is the Bulls, the Timberwolves, and the Pistons. And in this deal, the Pistons are going to be sending Jaden Ivey, and the Timberwolves are going to be sending Mike Conley to the Chicago Bulls, in which the Pistons will receive Kevin Huerter, who is coming from the Bulls, and Dario Saric, who is going to be going from the deal with involving the Kings the other day, where he was traded to the Bulls along 2 second-round picks for Keon Ellis and DeAndre Hunter, which we'll get into in a little while. He is now being rerouted to now go to the Detroit Pistons. Detroit is also going to get a first-round swap from Minnesota in this year's class, ultimately moving them up just a little bit for the Timberwolves to do a little bit of a salary dump here to make themselves a little bit easier. So we'll go into it from the Timberwolves perspective because they obviously didn't really get anything in return. This is obviously shaking up to be a bigger move by doing this and trading Mike Conley and salary dumping him to the Chicago Bulls. They are ultimately dropping below the second apron and getting into the first apron, allowing themselves to aggregate salary and take even on more salary, not having to replicate 100% salary in a trade to get a guard like either James Harden or John Morant, who have now been on the trade block, or even Giannis Antetokounmpo, who is said to be that they are in those sweepstakes for. They could also use that to call back Chicago up to go maybe get a guard like Kobe White or Ayo Dosunmu, with them adding a lot of guards today as well. But that is something to discuss a little bit later. We will see what the Timberwolves do in that regard. But moving off Mike Conley, someone who had kind of been not really key for their rotation and had some struggles staying in the starting lineup, even if he's a solid playmaker, but not the best offensive creator, and definitely slowed down a little bit defensively. Definitely, I think, is a move in the positive regard for the Timberwolves to make some more moves down the line. But let's go into the Bulls and the Pistons here. We'll first start with the Pistons. They're obviously giving up Jaden Ivey, someone who was a restricted free agent that they did not want to extend this offseason. Someone that I thought, could have been a part of this future, but more likely with his injuries history and with the the Pistons' success these last couple seasons with him not really being there, and kind of was the writing on the wall that the guard could be moved off of. I thought he would have had a little bit higher value than this and maybe could have gone to a team like Minnesota, but I do think the fit with Chicago will be pretty solid. His ability to drive to the basket and be a downhill threat will be nice to complement along some of these other younger guards like Josh Giddey, another wing, and Matus Bazelis, and kind of this young direction that the Bulls are going into, kind of flipping some other guards but investing maybe into some other younger product to really reset and to help them. I think this is perfect for the Bulls. They've made a lot of smart moves these last couple of days, which we'll get into two more that the Bulls have been involved on later in this video, but I do think, obviously, just having to give up Kevin Huerter and Dario Saric to obviously take on the money of Mike Conley, but to take a flyer on Jaden Ivey is definitely the right thing to do. Huerter and Saric, not really going to mean much for this team. Huerter being expiring, and obviously Dario Saric coming in alongside with the Kings being just like a filler player for the Bulls here in that deal the other day. And then you obviously they obviously bring in those players. The Pistons bringing in Kevin Huerter and Dario Saric, I think, will be nice. Dario Saric can add some scoring and spacing for this front court, something that they could valuably use on the edges. And then Kevin Huerter is another three-point sniper and scorer, something that this Pistons team desperately has needed alongside guys like Cade Cunningham, and I think could be a little bit of a Malik Beasley light for this squad with his ability to be a hot scorer. And then for the Bulls, like I mentioned, they take on Conley, take on Ivey Jr., don't really have to give up much. Take a flyer on him. I think it's a solid move for them. I do think they do have too many guards now with all these moves, so we'll have to see what they do down the line. But I do think Ivey might not be the perfect fit for their team, but it's something to kind of explore and maybe extend on a team-friendly contract and maybe use as a potential asset down the line if you do need it to kind of reshape this roster to fill another need. So ultimately, Timberwolves saving some salary here, looking to get into the Giannis sweepstakes. Chicago as well, getting involved with Jaden Ivey and taking on the salary of Mike Conley. We'll see if he ends up staying there or gets flipped later on. And then the Bulls getting some additional shooting and Kevin Huerter and Dario Saric. I would have thought that maybe Jaden Ivey would have had a little bit more value. Maybe they would have traded Tobias Harris to go and get Michael Porter Jr., but it doesn't seem like that's the move. Just going to be on the edges, bringing in Huerter and Saric. And for the Pistons, a top team in the East, adding some more scoring and spacing, I think is definitely solid. And then this shocker dropped just recently as well, with the Bulls and the Celtics getting involved in a deal, one that was explored during the off-season when reports came up from Michael Scotto of Hoops Hype that the Celtics were trying to trade Anthony Simons at the deadline. And even at the offseason, we're looking at some bigs like maybe Daniel Gafford, maybe Ivica Zubac with some picks, but they ultimately settled with Nikola Vucevic in the offseason. The Bulls wanted Simons and a first for Vucevic. The Celtics said no, and in this deal, the Bulls then trade Vucevic and a second-round pick to Boston for Anthony Simons and a second-round pick. The second-round picks have been now announced, so basically the Bulls are getting a second-round pick, essentially the worst in 2026 from an abundance of teams, but one of the teams you need to know that's involved is the Pelicans, so it will be a high value pick, most likely a top 5 first round pick there, second round pick there for the Bulls. So basically a first round pick for them, getting what they wanted last year. And the Celtics get a 2027 Nuggets pick, obviously with the Nuggets being pretty good, probably going to be a middle to end second round pick. So not great for the Celtics there, especially with Anthony Simons having a pretty solid run with this team as of late, kind of gelling in defensively and being that kind of three-point scorer and sniper that he was for this squad. He seemed to really find his role, and many Celtics fans and even media members wanted him to kind of get that extension maybe next off season with this team on a team friendly contract. But unfortunately for the Celtics, they value those savings, and that is what this deal is basically doing, saving themselves some money. I believe around $5 million here, helping them drop underneath the first apron. Getting out underneath both of those aprons now has been a goal of the Celtics last in the offseason, ducking the second, now ducking the first, and now are still just a couple $1 million shy of ducking that luxury tax now moving some of those veteran minimum salaries like an Xavier Tillman, a Chris Boucher, and multiple of those would have to get that job done. So maybe that's not fully what the Celtics do, but saving some money and getting some much needed center depth is key for the Celtics. Obviously, Vucevic is getting a little bit older and maybe he's not the best defensive center, but many people had those claims for Anthony Simons when he was traded for Drew Holiday. He wasn't going to fit well, and we all saw how he seemed to be a little bit of a fan favorite towards the end of his tenure with the Celtics squad, even if it was just half a season. So I think that Vucci Mane can kind of do something similar. Once again, with the Celtics having some struggles in that front court, obviously Kid has been amazing, Garza has been as well, but when one of those guys has been out, it has been a little bit of a weird problem running small ball lineups. I do think the Celtics addressing that front court and adding someone is very key. Maybe Vucevic wasn't the best fit, like I mentioned. Maybe a Zubac with those picks, or maybe even a Daniel Gafford would have been a little bit better for this Boston Celtics team. But basically, Vucevic is an expiring contract. It is a trial run. It is a test run. Someone that they can ultimately see if he can work long term, and maybe could be someone that could be that backup center for the future. Right, at 35 years of age, he is a little bit older, but completely isn't washed and could still be a contributor starter for the Bulls, but I think could even be a better backup, especially for this Celtics team, working a little bit on that offensive hub role and spacing and shooter that he is in that front court could be very, very beautiful for Joe Mazzulla's team. And then obviously for the Celtics, they have to give up that 2026 second and give up Simons, who's been on a pretty good heater, but they do get the possibility of either keeping Vucevic or using that flexibility to address another need in that front court, maybe in the offseason if Vucevic doesn't fit. And then for Simons, obviously, he has been great for the Celtics, but with them having, Jason Tatum potentially coming back at the end of the year, Derek White, Peyton Pritchard, Jaylen Brown, all these scorers, even if sometimes his scoring was needed in some of these droughts for the Celtics, I do think it was just a little bit too much. And I do think now with the Celtics obviously ducking the first and second apron, they have more flexibility on the buyout market, which could presume them to go pursue maybe a buyout guard. Maybe it is a Mike Conley. Maybe it's a Javon Carter who got waived by the Bulls earlier. Maybe it's even CP3 who's on the Clippers and still hasn't been waived. There are a lot of possibilities for the Celtics to go out there and to nab another guard that can still create off the ball, on the ball, and off the ball, and could still be another solid addition, similar to what they did last year with Torrey Craig. But ultimately, I think the main piece in all of this is just flipping expirings for each team. The Bulls, obviously, like we mentioned, now have Simons, now have Ivy, have Josh Giddey, have Ayo Dosunmu, have Kobe White. Some sort of deal is going to happen with this, even Trey Jones. Something is going to happen with this guard rotation. There will be another move involving their team. Things have already been linked, but I do believe that this is a very good deal for both sides as well. Even if the Bulls do keep Simons on a little bit of a team-friendly deal, I still think he could be a solid guard addition coming off the bench for them. And they got a basically first-round pick for moving off Nikola Vucevic, something that they wanted desperately last season and why they wouldn't move off him to Golden State. So for the Bulls, it is a little bit of a win there as well. So now that we went over those three trades that happened today, kind of the meat and bones of today so far, and who knows, there might be even more trades going down, so stay tuned to Switch City to get the latest updates. I do want to go over the two trades that did happen earlier this week because I was busy when they did go down, didn't have the time to do it, and I feel like giving a few words will, be nice. I'm not going to be as detailed, but definitely want to give some words. So obviously, we saw the first deal that happened the other day where the Cavs traded DeAndre Hunter to the Kings for Dennis Schroeder and Keon Ellis, and this three-team deal included the Bulls, who acquired for Dario Saric and 2 future second-round picks to get involved in this deal. They got one from the Cavs and one from the Kings, which is why a lot of Kings fans were very mad because last offseason they could have, extended Keon Ellis, maybe flipped him for a little bit more, tendered his qualifying offer, but no, they let him be a restricted free agent. They were going to lose him anyways, and then didn't play him, so they got no value for him and ended up having to give up draft capital alongside Keon Ellis, something that they were hoping to get for Keon Ellis to officially move off of him, and Dennis Schroeder, who was their main acquisition this offseason when they basically made other moves so that they could have the luxury to be able to sign Dennis Schroeder. It's kind of funny what the Kings do, but they try to stay relevant. It falls apart. Now I think they're finally admitting to the rebuild, and it does make sense. So for the Kings, they get DeAndre Hunter, who's had a down season, viewed as a 3-and-D wing, but hasn't really been that great of a 3-and-D wing. But I think it's nice for the Kings because they do lack wings, right? Like Keegan Murray's been out for most of the year. They've had to run a lot of Nick Clifford, and even when they do run a lot of their lineups, Zach LaVine's playing some small forward. They have a lot of their guards playing a lot of small forward. So I do think DeAndre Hunter could be, solid for them. I know people are saying like, oh, well, they had cap space and now they're trading for $25 million for an unproven player that isn't really that good. Well, what are the Kings going to use their cap space for? Nothing. They're bad signings anyways. So it doesn't really make sense for the Kings to be raving about cap space, right? Yes, they had to give up a second round pick. You can hate on them for that. And obviously moving off of Dennis Schroeder and Keon Ellis, guys that, Dennis Schroeder, one they shouldn't have signed, Keon Ellis, someone that they should have actually kept. But I think that for the Kings, this isn't the worst situation of all time because they got a wing, something that they could use. At least they didn't trade him for a guard. Now, the Cavs, this is a huge move. They bring in Keon Ellis and Dennis Schroeder. Ellis, someone who's going to be a perimeter threat, someone that they could use to kind of help fill that void of Ty Jerome leaving alongside Dennis Schroeder, playing some of those backup guard minutes, which I think this Cavs team desperately needs, specifically with Darius Garland's injury, and that's even where the Cavs get into some rumors with James Harden, which we've heard some discussions on. I won't make a concrete video on that until something officially happens, but you might be seeing a video coming on that in the future. But the Cavs obviously looking to save some money, make some moves on the margins here. Obviously, a top team of these last couple of seasons going all in with this core four. They've had some rough playoff series, and then this year kind of falling from grace in the regular season, have bounced back a little bit. They had a 5-game win streak at one point with Darius Garland going out, and now we're looking to not only shed some money, but make some moves on the exterior to really go all in this Eastern Conference. And adding Schroeder, who I know can be a long-term value piece for them, could be solid, and Keon Ellis as another potential extension could really fill in that guard room, especially if they do look to move off Darius Garland, regardless if it's for James Harden or regardless if it's for some other piece down the line. And then the Bulls here, like we mentioned, they get involved. They get those 2 second-round picks for just taking on Sarge's money, and they ultimately use Sarge alongside Kevin Huerter to flip to Detroit to bring in Jaden Ivey and Mike Conley. So I do think that is a win for the Bulls, getting even more draft capital and just reaping on benefits for trading expiring contracts. And then the last deal, and the least talked about deal, but still a very great deal to talk about, involves the Atlanta Hawks and Vit Krejci, as they sent him to the Portland Trail Blazers for Duop Reith and 2 future second-round picks. Krejci has been absolutely amazing as a solid sniper and scorer for this Hawks team, so it did raise a little bit of a question and concern on why they would want to move him, but obviously with the addition of Corey Kispert into this wing rotation, having Jalen Johnson, just having a bunch of offensive scorers, Vit Krejci has kind of fallen in this rotation, so it does make sense for them to capitalize on that, get 2 additional second-round picks. I believe now the Hawks have 7 second-round picks, which I know the Grizzlies have 17 first. That's a lot more, but 7 second-round picks can definitely help you on the margins using some of their other contracts. Maybe they do use a Kristaps Porzingis with some of these contracts to make an upgrade for this team this season, right? There are a lot of other possibilities for this Hawks team. Also trading for Duop Reith, who is out for the season. They do have the possibility to waive him and use that to free up a roster spot to then either convert someone or go and sign someone out there on the margins for the buyout market, which could even make this team a little bit deeper for a little bit of a reviving into the play-in and maybe even make that playoff run for the Portland Trail Blazers. They get another scorer and sniper. Portland ranked one of the worst three-point shooting teams in the NBA this season, so bringing in some more scoring on the wing I think is definitely going to be great, and Vit Krejci can kind of plug in those margins. They didn't have to give up much, right? Obviously Reith, who's out for the season, and 2 second-round picks. A team like Portland, I feel like this is some great value for them to kind of add as well. So ultimately, there were a lot of trades that did go down here, right? 5 of them to be exact over these last couple of days. I appreciate you guys hearing my thoughts on all of them. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Like I mentioned, if your team was involved, what are your guys' kind of main takeaways from these trades? Obviously, there's going to be more and more coming through these next couple of days, hours, I suspect even more to come today, so we'll definitely be keeping an eye on that and keeping you guys posted as we gear up for the trade deadline, and then doing some more videos here on Switch City throughout the season. Like I stated, try to do a video once every week. I've been falling behind recently with the end of the month, so I definitely want to get back on the train, and I feel like kind of starting off with today, kind of getting into some trade deadline stuff and finding my flexibility to do these videos will be key. So that's going to be something that I progress forward to more in 2026, so I hope you guys do enjoy it. Once again, thank you guys so much. If you do enjoy the content, hit the like and subscribe button. We just hit 250 followers or subscribers, which is absolutely key, and I really, really thank you guys for all the love and support to everyone who's hit the subscribe button already or does watch these videos. But thank you guys so much. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Have a great rest of your day, and peace out.